as when you guys could have been
now
doing
it's
this 20
slurring in
years
my
ago.
head.
I'm exhausted.
Councillors, ladies and gentlemen, please be upstanding for the Mayor of the City of Clarence, Councillor Brendan Long.
Well, hello and welcome all, and before proceeding I pay my respects to the Mulrimina people as the traditional and original custodians of the lands on which we meet, and I acknowledge the continuing connection of the Tasmanian Aboriginal people to the skies, land and waterways. I pay respect to elders past and present. Before we commence with tonight's council meeting, please let us all pause for a quiet moment of reflection and respect. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Colleagues, please be seated. Well, good evening and welcome to the Clarence City Council meeting of Monday, the 21st of October 2024. This meeting is being broadcast live on YouTube, and what is said in this meeting is not protected by privilege, and there is a link to the agenda papers on Council's website. Item number 2, apologies, there are none. Item number 3, declarations of interest of councillors or close associate. Are there any declaration from councillors? There being none, we now head into our omnibus items. 4.1, the confirmation of the minutes. That the minutes of the council meeting held on the 30th of September 2024 have been circulated. Are there any issues arising? All right, we move now to 4.2, Mayor's communication. I would like to acknowledge, firstly, the recent passing of former federal member for Franklin and Glenorchy Alderman Harry Quick. Harry represented Franklin in the federal parliament for 14 years, from 1993 to 2007, and he is well known to many of us. Always constituent focus, Harry was hardworking and highly regarded across the political spectrum. In fact, he'd often pick up the phone or reach out to me with advice and constructive feedback, which I always greatly appreciated. Before I invite all gathered to stand for a minute's silence in Harry's memory, I call on the Deputy Mayor to say a few words. Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Following our last meeting, I'm deeply saddened to again be here this evening to pay tribute and speak about the loss of a great contributor to our local community, and of course we're talking about Harry Quick. And as the former member, federal member for Franklin, I worked with Harry, as have many of us in the chamber this evening, for many years. And it's my honour to pay tribute to a man who was a tireless champion for the people of Franklin. Harry was born in Victoria on the 28th of June in 1941, but make no mistake, Harry was a Tasmanian through and through, and he spent a lifetime working with and for people. Harry was a teacher for 23 years and also an electorate officer for former Senator the Honourable Michael Tate for 5 years before winning the seat of Franklin in 1993. Harry brought with him a down-to-earth, hands-on approach, and it's that approach that saw Harry re-elected in 96, 98, 2001 and 2004, prior to him announcing his retirement just ahead of the 2007 election, which meant he'd served almost 15 years as a federal MP. And I think there can be no doubt that it was Harry's work ethic and genuine care for people that shifted what was undoubtedly a seat that was a stronghold for the Liberal Party to becoming a safe seat for the Labor Party in more recent times. And in fact, it's notable that for the 7 elections prior to Harry's election, it had been held by the former late Bruce Goodluck, and indeed I think 70 years of the 90 years of the seat's existence had been held by the Liberal Party prior to that time. So I think what that demonstrates is that the people of Franklin respond to members that work hard to address important grassroots issues that affect their daily lives, and Harry demonstrated those qualities in spades. In fact, in his inaugural speech in 1993, he talked about the establishment of an electorate office out at Bridgewater and how important that it was to provide a voice for people in the grassroots communities that prior to that hadn't had such representation. And when I opened my electorate office, he was a massive supporter of that at that time because they weren't prevalent in the community. After retiring from Parliament and having lived in Berriedale for 47 years, it was unsurprising to see Harry put his hand up again for service in the local community, this time being elected to the Glenorchy City Council as Deputy Mayor in 2014 and again as a councillor in 2022. Harry Quick's been described as a truth teller and a man of the people. When I think of Harry, I'm quite often reminded of Rudyard Kipling's poem If. So I think many of you will be familiar with that, but in particular, I think of the last verse, which reads, "If you can talk with crowds and keep your virtue, or walk with kings nor lose the common touch, if neither foe nor loving friends can hurt you, if all men count with you but none so much, if you can fill the unforgiving minute with 60 seconds worth of distance run, yours is the earth and everything that's in it, and, which is more, you'll be a man, my son." Harry was a man who didn't lose the common touch, was a man of the people. I offer my condolences to his family, and after a lifetime of dedication to state and federal and local politics, may I say, and very well deserved, rest in peace, my friend.
Well, thank you, Deputy Mayor. Colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the City of Clarence, I would like to express our condolences to Harry's family. I now invite everyone to please be upstanding for a minute's silence. Thank you. Please be seated. I'd now like to table a letter dated the 4th of October 2024 from the former Minister for Local Government, the Honourable Nick Street MP, congratulating Council on receiving the Delivering Excellence Award at the Local Government Association of Tasmania Annual Conference on the 4th of September 2024, and so tabled. I'd also like to table a letter and photographs from Miss Audrey White of Howrah, who writes, "Dear Lord Mayor and Clarence City Council," I thank Audrey for the promotion. "It is with heartfelt gratitude I write to you to express my thanks for the Youth Assistance Quick Response Grant I received earlier this year for my attendance at the Essex International Jamboree 2024. It was an incredible experience, and I have since returned with many memories, friends and lifelong skills I'm keen to share with my community. Kindest regard, Audrey White of Howrah." That's wonderful. Thank you, Audrey. And I'll have that circulated for the information of colleagues as well, please. Moving now on to 4.2.4, diary entries from the 1st of October to today, the 21st of October. They've been circulated, my diary entries, as well as the Deputy Mayor and Councillor Chong representing me on my behalf at different events. I thank them very much for that. Moving now on to 4.3, council workshops as listed in the agenda. 4.4, tabling of petitions. CEO, are there any petitions?
No, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, CEO. Moving now on to 4.5, reports from outside bodies. The first one being Copping Refuse Disposal Site Joint Authority. Councillor Walker, anything to report? Tasway South, Councillor Warren. Okay, moving on to Taswater Corporation. I can report that I'll be attending the Taswater General Meeting in Launceston next Monday, the 28th of October, and following that meeting that will involve the tabling of the annual report. I'll have more to report at our next council meeting on the 11th of November. And out of session, I'll forward a copy of that annual report to all colleagues as well. The Greater Hobart Committee, our next meeting is scheduled for the 13th of November. So again, following that meeting, I'll, at the next available opportunity, provide an update to colleagues. Are there any other reports from council and special committees and other representative bodies? Councillor Chong.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'll table the Richmond Advisory Committee meeting minutes of September and Cycling South minutes.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Councillor Hunter.
Thank you. I'd like to table the committee meeting minutes from the Australian Coastal Councils Association, of which I'm council's representative for. The meeting was held Monday, October 14th.
Thank you, Councillor Hunter. Councillor James.
Just a question.
Are you okay, Ms Ellis?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Yes, is the chair of the Active Living Advisory Committee going to present a report at this meeting?
Thank you. The Chair, like to take the question?
Yes, I'm happy to take the question. Yes, thank you, Councillor, for your question. The Active Living Advisory Committee is yet to meet since our last meeting. So to anticipate your next question, if you have minutes you would like us to consider from your committee, Tracks and Trails, then I would suggest you forward them to us.
Just in response to that, Mr Mayor, those minutes have been forwarded to
Good.
you.
Thank you, Councillor James.
Thank you.
Are there any other reports from colleagues? There being none, we move now to 4.6, the weekly briefing reports of the 30th of September, 7th and 14th of October 2024 have been circulated to councillors. Are there any matters arising? Councillor James.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. Firstly, on the 30th of September, the planning application update on the South Arm Water reuse pipeline. It says in the attachment, it says, and I quote, "A formal planning application has now been lodged and the CEO has provided landowner consent under section 52(1)(b), because this involves portions of council land." My question is, given that there is going to be a pipeline not only on portions of council land, but also on private property, will those persons or parties have access to Class A water rights and will have to pay for them, including council?
Thank you, Councillor James. CEO, you or Mr Martin take this question?
I think I'll take it, but I'll defer to Mr Maher if he needs to add anything more. Through you, Mayor, that I understand would be ultimately a matter for the proponents, given that the pipeline is a private asset, not a public asset.
Mr Maher, anything else to add? Or I think that's sort of... Please.
Through you, Mayor, just to add to that, the primary purpose of it is for water for agricultural purposes, though it's not, the DA is not predicated on whether it is used for other forms of water. But as the CEO said, it would come down to a private arrangement which would need the approval of the state government.
Thank you, Mr Maher. Thank you, CEO. Councillor James, any other questions?
Thanks, Mr Mayor. On the 14th of October, proposed changes to start-up time of council meetings. It does say, amongst other things, that the following Councillor Hunter's motion on the 29th of July regarding the proposed change to the time of council meetings, which didn't pass this place. It did have a workshop, and obviously what is going to happen is that council will ask the community to select their preferred start time for council meetings from the following options. Will that come back to a workshop once this particular consultation has been completed? And will council, as it would in an elect a poll or any other situation, make the final decision as to whether or not we change those dates as have been proposed as alternative start times of council meetings, 6 p.m, 6:30, 7 p.m, excuse me, or other?
CEO, thank you.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. Yes, the intention is to bring the consultation feedback back to a workshop and then discuss options with council, and any change will need to come through this chamber.
Right, are there any other matters arising from the weekly briefing reports? Councillor Mulder, thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I refer to the weekly briefing reports of whenever it was, particularly a letter dated the 9th of October to the residents of Pipeclay, Esplanade, Cremorne, in which it basically says that there are some temporary traffic and management arrangements being undertaken in respect of bollards to separate the undermined sections, and I'm quoting, of the road by installing bollards to delineate the edge and prevent vehicles from driving or parking in that zone. There is also a suggestion that there will be some further, more comprehensive, long-term responses or actions being taken upon this path. I'm aware of some community circulating material which talks about upgrading sections of the road, providing parking spaces, providing access to boat launching and parking facilities. This has been a long-term issue going on. Can we have some idea of the extent of those works and the time frame for the permanent solution to this matter, which I might say has been going on for as long as I've been first elected to council, which is now 19 years ago?
Thank you, Councillor Mulder. Mr Graham, please.
Through Mr Mayor, I'll take that one on notice and inform council.
Councillor Mulder. Thank you. Are there any other matters arising for the weekly briefing reports? All right, well, colleagues, I note we're at the end of our omnibus items. Can I please have a mover of the omnibus motion? Thank you, Councillor Hunter. Seconded, Councillor Chong. I'll put that motion. All those in favour? Against? All right, thank you. Moving now on to item number 5, public question time. 5.1, public questions or notice. This evening we have 3 questions, 2 from Mr Bradley Walker, 1 from Mr Ed Staples. CEO, please, to read the question and provide the answers.
Thank you, Mayor. Our first 2 questions come from Mr Bradley Walker of Howrah. The first question relates to permit conditions for permit SD 2010/44. The question is as follows. Follow-up question in relation to question asked about construction works on land outside of SD 2010/44 asked at the 30th of September 24 meeting. Could Council please confirm that they are aware of the construction works happening on these sites and that Council accept the works were in accordance with relevant weed and hygiene management plan dated September 2020? The answer to that question is that I can confirm that Council received quarterly audits from the developer's ecological consultant in April and July 2021 that addressed the weed and hygiene management for the associated pipeline works undertaken in the easement along the eastern boundary of the balanced lot. On the basis of these audits, Council accepts that the works were undertaken in accordance with the approved weed and hygiene management plan from September 2020. The second question from Mr Walker is in relation to development application 2018/457 in relation to 17 Emmeline Court, Rugby. The question is, can Council please update with the details of the current status of DA 2018/457, 17 Emmeline Court? The answer to that question is that the planning application for 16 multiple dwellings at 17 Emmeline Court, Rugby was approved on the 9th of September 2019. In accordance with the provisions of Section 3, subsection 5A and Section 53, subsection 5B, respectively, of the Land Use Planning and Approvals Act 1993, the permit has been extended twice, the maximum allowable under the legislation, and must now be substantially commenced prior to the 9th of September 2025. A third question tonight comes from Mr Ed Staples of Geilston Bay, and Mr Staples asked the following question. Having recently relocated from the ACT, where all pet cats born after the 1st of July 2022 must be contained on an owner's property, I'd like to ask why the Clarence City Council hasn't adopted similar best practice rules around the keeping of a cat in order to assist in protecting our native wildlife and or preventing cats sustaining injuries by fighting with other animals or being hit by cars. In our local area, we've noticed quite a few cats roaming around the neighbourhood. The answer to the question is that the Domestic Animals Legislation Amendment Bill 2022 from the ACT Government introduced amendments to the Domestic Animals Act 2000 with effect from 1 July 2022 that all cats born after 1 July 22 must be contained on their property. Tasmanian cat legislation is provided under the Cat Management Act 2009 and the Cat Management Regulations 2022. Currently, Tasmanian legislation does not provide that cats must be contained within their property. Section 19 of the Act provides that councils may declare an area of land within the authority of the council to be an area that cats are prohibited, but it does not provide that cats must be contained, only that they are prohibited from a declared cat management area. A new Tasmanian Cat Management Plan 2024 to 2029 is currently being developed by the Department of Natural Resources and Environment Tasmania, which will provide a revised framework for cat management for the next 5 years and will incorporate experiences and knowledge gained during the implementation of the current 2017 to 2022 Cat Management Plan. Council is currently developing a cat management policy following extensive community consultation undertaken earlier this year. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, CEO. Moving now on to 5.4, questions without notice. Are there any questions from the gallery this evening? Thank you.
My name is Victor Marsh from the Bluff. On July the 8th, 2024, the Community Awareness Campaign motion was passed unanimously. Would the Council please update the community on its progress?
Ms Wicks, are you in a position to provide an answer? Thank you.
We're currently in the final stages of developing this and should be ready to launch in the next few weeks.
Right, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr Marsh. Any other questions?
Okay.
No further questions? All right then. We'll move now on to item number 6, which is deputations by members of the public. And members of the public making a deputation reminded that they are limited to 3 minutes and a timer will sound at the end of that time. And in the interest of fairness, I will strictly enforce the time limit. I understand that we have 3 deputations this evening. CEO, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Our first deputation tonight is Mr David Batchelor in respect to the development application for Unit 2 Ford Parade, Lindisfarne.
Name and suburb, please, Mr Batchelor.
Good, thank you. Can you hear me okay?
We can, thank you, sir.
Well, thanks for the opportunity to speak to you tonight. I've provided members of the Council with a copy of our representation that I attached to an email last week. I also invited councillors to meet us on site last Friday and earlier today, but I realised that this was a pretty tight time frame, but the agenda really only came to hand on Thursday, so it is what it is. I've also forwarded the text of this address to members. We've carefully examined the recommendations going to Council, and just by way of background, the property in question was owned by my late parents, and we are very keen to develop the property as a dwelling for us in a way that meets our residential needs. It is our desire to return to the Clarence municipality. To this end, we have given significant thought to shaping our future and gone to some cost to engage our architect. In looking at the document being considered tonight, we'd note that any concerns regarding overshadowing, private open space, provision for landscaping and gardening are not seen as issues, and importantly, the impact on the amenity of other dwellings is also not seen as an issue. In fact, in the discussions that we had with our architect, we went to some trouble to ensure through high-set windows and screening there would be no negative impact on neighbours. The reason given for ejection seems to fall on 2 issues: streetscape and site coverage. We strongly believe that the conclusions made re streetscape are incorrect. In fact, as already pointed out, the attachments with the documentation going to Council are out of date and do not show that 3 Park Road now has 2 large 2-storey units constructed, replacing an old single-storey dwelling. Further, there's an observation that there is only 1 property, that's a workers' cottage on the street at 11 Park Road, is said to be the only property closer to the street. We also think that's incorrect. A visit to the site and a careful consideration of our plan will show that our proposal will not in fact be incongruent with the existing and evolving streetscape. I also note that 3 adjacent properties in Ford Parade are also closer to the street than the proposal for our property. Parallel Wellington Parade has seen new large two-storey developments. I'd also point out, make a comment in respect of the anchorage at 3 Wellington Road, which apparently is slightly over 100 metres, and I think the fact that it's within a few metres of 100 metres is pretty trivial, so I think it is relevant. It's also on a prominent corner site. It's close to ours if you're driving along this area. The development is also high density, and many similar retirement home developments are scattered in large numbers.
Thank you, Mr Batchelor. We're at that 3-minute...
Jeez.
Thank you, sir. CEO.
Thank you, Mayor. Our second deputation tonight is from Ms Jacqueline Scanlon in relation to the Unit 2 Ford Parade development application.
Ladies and gentlemen of the Council, thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Jacqueline Scanlon and I, along with my 3-year-old daughter, reside at 1/2 Ford Parade in Lindisfarne. I'm here to voice my strong objection to the planning application for 2/2 Ford Parade, which seeks to transform a single-storey building into a 2-storey structure. I urge you to uphold the recommendation made by Daniel Maher, Head of City Planning, to refuse this proposal. As outlined in Mr Maher's recommendation report, the proposed extension does not meet the performance criteria for setback frontage or site coverage, but I want to focus on the personal impact if this planning proposal goes ahead. I disagree with the report that the proposed dwelling does not cause unreasonable loss of amenity to adjoining properties, in particular the reduction of sunlight to habitable rooms, overshadowing private open spaces, and visual impact caused by the dwelling scale. The overshadowing forecast submitted with this application was based on winter conditions. While the report claims that the overshadowing remains below the 3-hour threshold, I argue that during other seasons this impact will be much greater. My home is already quite dark. The large windows in my living spaces will be completely shaded in the afternoon by the proposed structure. As shown in the overshadowing projection, by 3 p.m. my home will be engulfed in approximately 50% shadow. This lack of natural light is concerning, with negative impacts on our health and increased electricity costs due to the need for artificial lighting. Since knowledge of the building plan, whenever I walk into my dining room, I get so sad that the plan is approved that I won't see sky. I will only see my neighbour's 2nd story. It is something that I would expect and accept in a high-density city living, but not in Lindisfarne. Additionally, the projection indicates that by 3 p.m. our outdoor living space is covered in shadow. I work. My daughter is in daycare. It is the afternoon when we enjoy our outdoor living space. With this building plan, these spaces will be in shadow at the times we are free to use them. In addition, reduced sunlight means decreased warmth in our home, leading to higher heating costs and less comfortable living conditions. Despite having added $9,000 worth of insulation, my house remains cold. With the south-facing aspect and the age of the property, retrofitting with double glazing and wall insulation are not financially viable for me. We rely on afternoon sun as a primary source of natural heating, which the proposed building would obstruct. My house has an atrium-like room which acts as a heat trap, making it the warmest part of the property in the afternoon. Unfortunately, when this section is in shade, it is the coldest part of the house. The glass doors and the windows are on the western side and will be covered by shadow as shown in the overshadowing projection. I would also like to clarify the misunderstanding in Mr Maher's report regarding privacy. Mr Maher referred to the rear first floor deck, however my objection referred to the new ground floor deck and entryway. This change would compromise our privacy as neighbours would be less than 10 metres away with a direct view into our lounge room from this deck. In conclusion, I urge you to uphold the recommendation to refuse this application as mine and my daughter's well-being are at risk. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Mrs Scanlon. CEO, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Our final deputation tonight is from Mr Justin Foster in relation to the development application for Pipe Clay Esplanade.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm representing Marine and Safety Tasmania, who are the proponent for DA 2024-46537. The DA was subject to a number of representations that, on the most part, were not relevant to the works. That included the removal of sand off-site as opposed to retaining it and using it elsewhere. This is not a relevant consideration under the scheme, but aside from that, it was McMaster's understanding or observation that a lot of that sand would have organic matter and seagrass in it, and wasn't appropriate to be spread on beaches for renourishment. The environmental report does allow that to occur, and we are happy to discuss that with Council once the works are underway to determine whether in fact that is appropriate. Another representation was around the upgrading of the public road. Now, the public road and the development of the works, which is sand removal, does not improve the facility, extend the facility, or make it bigger, and does not attract additional usage to the area. And so upgrading the road is not necessary. And I don't know whether some of you would be aware that in 2013 Council deemed that any upgrade to that road was not suitable given the projected sea level rise and inundation and coastal erosion risk. Another representation was for the inclusion of a high tide landing and launching area. The area is not suitable for a high tide launching area, whilst it would be suitable for a small landing to aid egressing vessels. It's not something which this is relevant to this DA. And the last one was general traffic issues associated with the boat ramp. As I mentioned before, this works, which is to remove some sand to make it easier to launch on the existing site, does not improve the facility to the extent where additional vessels and cars would be coming. The planner's report its recommendation was to approve the DA subject to conditions. That condition was for the proponent to provide a construction environmental management plan, which the proponent is more than happy to do so.
Thank you, Mr Foster. I note that we're now at the end of our deputation, so I advise that Council now intends to act as a planning authority under the Land Use Planning and Approvals Act of 1993. Moving on to item 7.1, which is planning application for 66 and 78 Middle Tea Tree Road, Richmond, a two-lot subdivision. I'll call for a mover. The recommendation, please. Thank you, Councillor James. Second, thank you, Councillor Ritchie. Councillor James.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. And again, for those who attended the briefing on Friday, we did discuss this at length. And to a degree, it would have seemed that this will be one of the key problems with this. Is that it is required by the developer to have a flood report plan, and that, by the very nature, hinges on one of the key matters that why I believe this matter has been referred to Council and with the recommendation for refusal. It goes into a lot of detail about, to an extent, landlocking and flood-prone areas and the degree to which land which in another area for any other reason or purpose I would have thought, be recommended for approval because of the very nature of where this land is located and the very nature of where this low-lying area is prone for flooding. I mentioned on Friday, and I still have the view that there is possibly a way forward in this, and I would have thought that there may have been a template that could have been used, but with some safeguards on it if Council did have one of these in its admin, to be able to provide some moving forward in relation to having a development like that ultimately approved. But at the moment it appears that that's not the case, and therefore the officer's recommendation is for refusal, and it's spelt out in the recommendation, and I'll just read it because I think it's important to say that does not comply. This has demonstrated that future development of Lot 2 can achieve a tolerable risk from flood. And in regard to those matters identified as part of that clause. So reluctantly, I stand to move the motion. I hope that perhaps sometime forward we could have another look at this and therefore be able to give it the green light with some assistance from our planners or from other consultants that may be able to work around this and provide an affirmative movement forward. Thanks.
Deputy Mayor, thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Like Councillor James, it's an unfortunate situation that we find ourselves in with a refusal before us. Unfortunate in that information that was required re-flood was not able to be provided, and there being a difference of opinion about why and whether that should be provided. I did take the time, as colleagues are aware, because the answers were circulated by council staff in relation to just double-checking whether or not our officers did have access to any sufficient data that would have been able to put them in a position to be able to approve, because the actual clause doesn't say necessarily that the applicant needs to provide the report. It could be that if there was sufficient information at the hands of council officers, that could be deemed sufficient. But as per the advice provided to us, there was a deficiency in the flood mapping in the Richmond area. That's actually still the case, and it'll be subject to a question from me later on this evening. But that being the issue about why a report was required from the applicant in this particular instance, that there is that gap of information, and indeed we don't know when updated information does end up being undertaken where that lands. So it's quite appropriate in those circumstances that that information was sought, unfortunately wasn't provided, which leaves us in the position of not being able to give the green light, which I'm sure we otherwise would have been very keen to be able to do. So, like Councillor James, I hope we do see this come back in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Councillor Mulvin, thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. It's, I just find it interesting to say that it's about the flooding. We don't have enough information. The flood mapping is there. It's a question. Flooding is a question of contour lines and how much rain falls. It's not a question of, what it's doing. So we have an area now that's prone to flooding, and there are engineering solutions to this. Engineering solutions other than putting in landfill, which actually reduces the capacity of the basin, and that means that it rises. What I would like to see when this comes back to us, not so much evidence about where the water's likely to be. Take what's there, add 10% for a safety measure if you like, and then develop a AHD, a height datum that says we won't have anything solid underneath this. And these areas, although they're subject to inundation, does not mean they are uninhabitable or that we couldn't turn them into places where people could live. And I can go on for ages about flood mapping, and I can go on for ages about this thing. If it wasn't possible to use this good land to provide people with homes and houses, then I would like you to ask the people who built Venice as to whether flood is necessarily a negative. Because it's quite possible to design a property that for the 1 in 20 years, or if it comes out 1 in 10 years or 1 in 5 years floods, is actually more than capable of withstanding that flood, withstanding the inundation, and then moving on. So it's not all about, oh, it's subject to flooding, you can't build it. It's what do you build in these areas? It's taking note of the environment and the projections about that environment, and then building resilient structures that can manage that environment. And this idea that, where the proponents have failed in this, and it's in the officer's report, is that they have failed to explain how the development would deal with flooding, not the flooding itself.
Any other colleagues wishing to? Councillor Hunter, thank you.
Question, if I may, Mr. Mayor. It's my understanding that the report that hasn't been provided will actually assist officers and the applicant to test what type of structure could be engineered for that site.
Mr. Maher, are you able to answer the question, please?
Through you, Mayor. Thank you, Councillor, for the question. The key aspect to the report that would need to be submitted is that it demonstrates that it meets a tolerable risk. So that both considers the amount of flooding, whether at depth and velocity from a hazard perspective, and also considers any mitigation that might be necessary to achieve that. In some cases, mitigation is capable of being achieved. In some cases, mitigation to such an extent would be so costly that it would, or unable to be achieved on the site that it would render the development ineffective. That's information that needs to be chased. I point out that the provisions of the overlay are through the state planning provisions. So council doesn't have the ability to change the questions it asks. Through the adoption of the LPS or updated flood mapping is our opportunity to revisit where it applies, not so much what questions are asked.
Thank you, Mr. Maher. I think this is quite a reasonable request and its due diligence on behalf of the Planning Authority. And I love the comment about Venice. What an amazing place. But goodness, had they done some flood mapping there, they might have changed how they constructed things.
Thank you, Councillor Hunter. Any other colleagues wishing to make a contribution? There being none, noting that Councillor Miles is now back in the chamber, I'll just wait for him to take his seat and then we'll put the... right of reply. Councillor James. Thank you. Colleagues, I don't put the motion. That is for refusal for the reasons outlined in the recommendation. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you, colleagues. Moving now on to item 7.2, which is a planning application for 1089 South Farm Road, Sandford, and 100 School Road, with access proposed from School Road, full lot subdivision. There's a recommendation for approval subject to conditions. I'll call for a mover, please, of the motion. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. A seconder. Thank you, Councillor Goyne. Deputy Mayor, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think we're all aware of the history of this particular development application that's before us, and so I won't speak too much in relation to the proposal, other than to say, obviously, Council's previous decision has been upheld and vindicated by TASCAT, and the necessary adjustments in respect of that determination have seen the application changed and resubmitted in a format that is something we are able to support, given the concerns around quarry and all the other things. So pleased to be able to support it on this occasion. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Goyne.
Nothing further to add.
Thank you. Any other colleagues wishing to make a contribution? Councillor Mulder. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Here we have a situation where I think for me there are two issues. One is the fact that this went to an appeal, and the basis of the appeal has a lot to do with a quarry that basically isn't operating and is unlikely to operate in the near future. And we've approved other areas here with sound attenuation reports, and it just bedevils me that we can't, every single property owner has to come and line up for a sound attenuation report to develop this particular thing when there's already one there. And, it's just one of these things where someone is trying to develop some land. But it is what it is. and the technical planning considerations, although we've managed to sneak some through before, this particular one hasn't worked, and that's a bit unfortunate for the people involved. But my question really comes is, for years now we've been sitting on a headworks contribution for the ceiling of School Road, and we have constantly not spent that money because we were waiting for the headwork contribution for the next lot of developers, of which these people are part. So my question now becomes, is we haven't asked for a headworks contribution. The developers are going to reconstruct parts of School Road outside their particular property. So my question is have we reached the point now where we're going to spend the money that we're supposedly holding in trust to complete the full sealing and reconstruction of School Road, and thereby avoid the massive amount of money we are spending on maintaining gravel road, even though we've got money in the kitty to do it?
A question, Mr. Graham. Councillor Moulton.
Through Mr. Mayor, the last decision from council was not to spend the headworks money now to upgrade the road, so it's a decision of council.
Thank you, Mr. Graham. Councillor Moulton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, can I foreshadow a motion at the next council meeting that we actually go and spend the money we've got stuck in the bank and use it to build a road rather than grading one?
So foreshadowed. Thank you, Councillor Moulton. Any other colleagues? Councillor Hunter. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
And then Councillor James.
I'm glad to see this come back to us in a reasonable format. On page 47, it notes that it is considered that the proposal will not generate a significant demand for or derive benefit from local public open space facilities, and a reduction of the maximum 5% cash in lieu of public open space contribution is therefore considered warranted. I personally think this is a bit of an assumption, as a considerable amount of those who live in Sandford, who have acreage, use public facilities for recreation, such as the Tangara Trail and beach reserves and facilities. So my question is this normal? How frequently does council reduce the 5% cash in lieu public open space contribution in this type of scenario?
Thank you. Mr. Marr.
Through you, Mayor. Councillor Hunter, thank you for the question. Yes, it is normal. It seems to be a practice council have had in for the last 6 or 7 years to acknowledge, the lack of demand for the local park or recreation. That's something that will be specifically considered through the revision of the open space strategy, and therefore the public open space strategy and any contributions coming out of that. And that's an appropriate time to consider that in a holistic and considered way, rather than an off-the-cuff consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Marr.
That's great. I'm glad we'll be reviewing that soon in the open space strategy, because I seriously don't think we should be considering these types of waivers, because we're really selling ourselves and the community short.
Thank you, Councillor Hunter. Councillor James.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just would like to correct a couple of things that have been a contribution from a couple of our colleagues. On page 36, I quote, public open space is not proposed as part of the subdivision. And summarising that, may I say that the original larger application identified a public open space connection opposite the intersection of Cremorne Avenue. So it seemed to me that in this particular case, there has been a contribution made as part of the larger application of public open space, and therefore one of the reasons why it hasn't been considered by the planners, and I need to be corrected if I'm wrong here, is because of that notation on page 36. The other comment that has been made relates to the quarry, and on page 41 it does say, and I quote, the site adjoins Sanford Quarry. It's a level 2 activity located at 100 School Road, Sanford, and the quarry undertakes extraction, crushing, screening activities and blasting, subject to an EPA approval, with all the lots within the subdivision being within the attenuation distance of so on and so forth. So when we had an application some years ago, this matter did raise as far as whether this quarry is operating, and one of the reasons why there was a statement from the EPA as part of the blasting and screening operations was that it was supportive because it was in a certain distance from the actual centre of the operation of the quarry. So it is an actual active quarry operation, and therefore it is still within the realms, as I see it, within the EPA approval for it to continue to operate. The other thing I want to mention here is that there are a number of lots on School Road that have not been developed or until that time when they are proceeded with. That is only at that stage that the headwork contributions that we currently have in the bank, and also what we're going to call in with relation to the owner of that particular area of land that is subsequently going to be divided or proceeded with. So we have this dilemma in relation to School Road, and that is that until such time as that developer decides to proceed with his development, then we are not, as I understand it, we're not able to proceed with the sealing of School Road other than that section that's been proposed within this particular application.
Thank you, Councillor James. Anyone else wishing to make a contribution? Right of reply, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I just thank colleagues for their contributions and the time and effort they've taken to examine what are some multi-layered issues in respect of this particular application and, of course, the future of this area, because given the operation of the quarry and the unknown future of the quarry, when it may or may not cease operating, that, of course, means that there are many things that need to be considered in a staged approach. So I thank colleagues for their contributions and their support.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'll put the motion, which is the recommendation for approval, subject to conditions. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you, colleagues. Moving now on to 7.3, which is a planning application for Pipe Clay Lagoon Cremorne, removal of sediment, specifically sand, from boat launching area, a pleasure boat facility, and the recommendation is for be approved subject to conditions and advice. I'll call for a mover, please. Councillor Moulder, thank you. And a seconder? Wendy Kennedy, it says Councillor Kennedy, thank you. Sorry, I'm being prompted here, so... Councillor Moulder, the floor is yours, thank you.
It seems a very sensible thing as we have these areas where recreation and boating, yes, I do have a conflict of interest, but Lorana with a 2 metre depth for the keel is unlikely to be visited to this particular area, let alone be launched or retrieved from this particular area. But yes, I've thrown the dinghy over the sands there a few times, and it's not really an issue with the development. But it's all these things is that there's a balance between the recreational use, using boats, having access to these areas. This wouldn't even be here if it wasn't within the lagoon, which is actually the perfect place to be launching boats, given the thing. But it just raises the issue so many times, and I think about places like the Lauderdale Canal, where suddenly, sedimentation is a big issue that can't be resolved, and therefore we can't use the asset the way we could. Yet here we have a perfect example, is if there's too much sediment in there, guess what you do? you pump it out. And you treat it as you would, because it is a balance, and therefore this is just, to me, a no-brainer. It's a question of yep, we want to use these lovely peaches. We want to still be this wonderful, within so close to the central city of a capital city, and you can throw your tinny in the dinghy in the water outside, and there was a time you could catch them flathead, but apparently they're a little bit of short supply. We'll have to have a talk to the suppliers about that. But you can't but agree with this as a very sensible way of dealing with our wonderful estuarine habitat.
Thank you, Councillor Moulder. Councillor Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and there's not much more I can add to Councillor Moulder's comments other than squid's pretty good down there as well. But getting back to your points earlier, Councillor Moulder, and I take some comfort in part 2 of the recommendation that prior to the commencement of the development and construction management plan for the site must be submitted, because we all understand the issues with pipe clay esplanade. And I do thank Mr Foster for his deputation earlier and explaining the process, but I need to feel very comforted that the people in that area aren't going to be disrupted any further than they are at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kennedy. Any other colleagues wishing to make a contribution? Being none, there may not be a... Thank you, Councillor Moulder. I'll put the motion. That is for approval, subject to conditions and advice. All those in favour? That's unanimous, 3 out of 3. Thank you, colleagues. Moving now on to 7.4, which is a planning application for 7 Warren Court, Howrah, a change of use to visitor accommodation. The recommendation is for approval. Call for a mover of the recommendation. Councillor Moulder, thank you. A seconder? Councillor Kennedy. Thank you. Councillor Moulder.
With a heavy heart and great reluctance, and with deep concern for the housing crisis that befits it, here we go again. Another residential premises being turned into basically a hotel. We all know what the planning scheme says about these things, and we all know how our hands are tied. We've had this debate a number of times, and I notice that the issue has been raised a number of times, but we are yet to act on it. Hobart City Council has an extra rate relating to Airbnb. Now, the matter is a planning matter, but my real issue is that if you're going to turn residences into commercial operations, shouldn't we be charging a commercial rate? That's the question, and that's what I put to you now, and I'm looking forward to us actually biting the bullet on this and getting some advice in relation to our current rating schedule, as we've discussed a number of times now, yet we still haven't made any action on it. Does this require another motion from the floor of council for us to start to move forward and say that we may not be in principle agreement with this stuff, we have our difficulties with it, but the control is not ours. It lives with the state government. It lives with the planning scheme, which is an instrument signed not by the mayor, but by the Minister for Planning for the state of Tasmania. That's where the whole issue about the planning lies. Blame us by all means. Go into the media and talk about us being obstructionists. We're only implementing your policies. And when we do implement your policies and we don't do it the way you'd like us to, suddenly we're bloody-minded dinosaurs. So let's get this rating stuff sorted out. If Hobart can do it, so should we.
Councillor Kennedy.
Only to say that I couldn't agree anymore, and Deputy Mayor has done a lot of work in this space, and having recently been subjected to one of these properties in a very quiet residential area, not my own, in the north of the state, and there were probably 40 or 50 people at a party that overnight had booked this property, and what the residents went through in that area was just torture. And it's happening. We can't do anything about it at the moment with how it sits, but I certainly hope we can.
Deputy Mayor, thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'll just briefly comment there's no surprise for colleagues around the table that I've had a long-running interest in this matter, motions to Legash and so on and so forth. Obviously, many of us would have seen the email that did come around from council officers today in relation to an update coming with respect to the rating aspect of it, and I greatly appreciate that. I would also add that colleagues may remember that I raised the issue, and I think it's worthy of including this into the future workshop that hopefully won't be too far away, that specifically relates to the definition or the interpretation under the legislation around what it's meant by retaining the primary residential function of an area, and whether we put our own definition around that, which gives us further scope to be able to use that as a tool in assessing the sorts of applications that come forward. I'm really excited to see what scope there might be in relation to that, and I think it's clause 8.3.2, subclause D of performance criteria 1, if I'm not mistaken. I think I'm correct there, but nevertheless, we look forward to that element also being added to what quite rightly has been mentioned about looking at the rating component as well. So I look forward to that as part of future discussions.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Any other colleagues wishing to make a contribution? Councillor James, thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and may I say from the outset that I will not be supporting this motion, and notwithstanding, and I do appreciate the head of city planning putting his advice or the advice as part B of the recommendation, because I think it needs to be raised and brought to the attention of the owner of the premises. It does go on page 142, and this is where I'm going to just spend a couple of minutes. And on under clause 8.3.2, in relation to gross floor area, the proposed visitor accommodation would have a gross floor area of 258 square metres, which exceeds the maximum floor area of 200 square metres prescribed by acceptable solution. Of course, then we go into the performance criteria, and then we sort of drill down into what in fact is the floor space, and as to whether or not it cause unreasonable loss of residential amenity, having regard to the privacy of adjoining properties. So in actual fact, the acceptable solution does raise this, and going into what the performance criteria spells out as a counter, if you want to call it that, to the acceptable solution, it doesn't, in my opinion, at least address, and that's in my opinion, address why there is an increase in the floor space as distinct from what is an acceptable floor space prescribed by the acceptable solution. Having said that, I'm in two minds of where we're going with this. I recall a comment made by the former planner, when Minister for Planning, when he made the comment, and I think he's on the right track here when he said there are sufficient safeguards within the statewide planning scheme for councils to deal with accommodation, change of use to visitor accommodation, and they are there within that planning scheme for councils to exercise. And in not one case can I recall have we had the challenge, or have we taken it to the tribunal, or whatever it now stands. Thank you, TASCAT. We haven't even tried to actually challenge what the statewide legislation entails, and given that is a mechanism for us to actually proceed with, I feel it's a shame. I'm not necessarily saying we should take every one of these, but it's come to the stage where we will say we'll blame the state, we'll blame the government for not moving in some of our colleagues' opinions to make changes to the short-term accommodation. But at the same time, I think we need to be very careful that we just cannot wait for some of these potential changes that may be being put forward as part of potential changes to the statewide planning scheme. So having said that, I'm going to vote against this. I feel that it just goes on and on and on, and it's sending a green light, in my opinion, to others to turn which is perhaps their right in a way, to be able to determine what they do with their property and whether or not they want to earn some extra income. But at the same time, it impacts on other properties, adjoining properties. And I just don't think that there is a good reason for us to say, look, we can't do anything about this. It's just beyond us. We need to talk to the government and so on and so forth. I think that is poppycock. I think at the end of the day, we can make a decision.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Any other colleagues wishing to make a contribution? Thank you, Councillor Warren.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yes, I echo my colleagues' concerns, and we hear the same comments and concerns raised every time we have one of these. We may yet hear the comment that we have to have these because we don't have enough monolithic hotels in our municipalities sending profits overseas. But most of us have concerns about the impact on the neighbourhood, putting people before profit. I'll just raise the B Part A there, there's an obligation not to cause a nuisance under noise. If you have residents next to you who cause a nuisance, that's possible to deal with. If you have different residents every weekend and up to 12 of them, it's not possible to deal with that in any ongoing way. Do you raise a complaint every single weekend with every single change of household? So this is not acceptable, and I can't support it, and I look forward to us having a solution in the near future.
Councillor Hume, thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Look, I also look forward to seeing those solutions come forward from the Legat working group, but dealing with the planning scheme as it stands, I am curious to know, Councillor James referred to some kind of mechanism that we have to deal with these through the planning scheme as it exists now, but didn't actually specify what that mechanism is. So I am somewhat curious as to what that is, because I'm sure that our planning staff, if such a mechanism existed, would have identified it. I would have been interested to hear from Councillor James. Unfortunately, he's finished his contribution now. Perhaps he can tell us at a later stage exactly what that mechanism is, that we can, currently address these things. The planning scheme, I believe, as it stands, is quite clear. That's what we're working under. I take the point about commercial properties. Perhaps we should be charging commercial rates. Certainly something we can have a look at. Very interested to see what the Legat working group has to bring forward. We can also lobby the state government over these issues. But yes, I am going to mention the point about formal accommodation and the fact that we have the visitor numbers in Tasmania. We have tourism is our largest industry. We have more tourists per head of population. It's a very significant industry. Brings a lot of dollars into our state, and also showcases our state to the country and the world. I think it's a very important industry, and I think we do need more formal accommodation. I'd be interested to know what we can do to develop more of it. And what Councillor Warren refers to as a monolithic hotel, I believe, is actually quite an elegant design. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hume. Councillor Walker.
Yes, all of what Councillor Hume said and and the and is that it's a different Airbnb application, but it's the same old Airbnb discussion. So as a planning authority, why should I not make some of the same points? And those points include that the cost of air travel in real terms has dropped significantly over the last 3 or 4 decades. In the last 3 or 4 decades, we have seen a hotel at the airport happen, which I guess to a degree is bringing some economic activity right at that location. I don't know how dispersed it is from there, but it's great to have that hotel there. It's a convenient thing. But we've lost the Motel Jason, City View, Beltana's no longer, if you like, as active in the accommodation space, and the Cambridge Inn is no more. So accommodation gone, population increase in tourism. Here's the deal. Councils and other levels of government cannot legislate outcomes. We cannot legislate intentions. Governments work in the space of incentives. And the incentive in Clarence is to go for broke with this because we appear to be anti-hotels. We've got a 140-bed solution to needs, and this council is spending treasure and time and energy stopping something that's really needed. Now it's right to do, I guess. 10 people think it should, two might not. But the wringing of hands around every Airbnb application is curious. And in fact, maybe for the next LGAT Awards, I'm going to nominate this planning authority for its ability to sit and act as a planning authority whilst also conducting kabuki theatre.
I have provided a great deal of latitude tonight during the debate. We are sitting as a planning authority. If I could please remind colleagues to keep their remarks and contributions to the matter before us relevant to planning matters. Anyone else wish to make a contribution? Being none, Councillor Moulder, right of reply, please.
LGAT, a working group. My proposal was to increase the rates because Hobart's already done it. Why are we going down this path of LGAT and working groups and ad infinitum bureaucracy which can do nothing but advise a government that just this week told them they're not interested in a whole range of things? My suggestion is that we just do the rates thing because it can be done and it should be done. Mr Mayor, you're quite right, the contributions about whether we have hotels or not. Yes, we could have 2 brand new hotels now if only the proponents had built them. It's not council that's blocking them, it's us frustration about their inability to do it. And why would they? Hotel occupancy at the top end is falling off. It's not bouncing back. However, the housing crisis is booming, and it's booming because of immigration and people have to live somewhere. And it's market forces, and I'm not trying to tell people what they should do, just pay your way. Just pay your way. You're going to run a commercial operation in what should be residential housing? Great. The planning scheme and the things and all the things that are with it, that's fine. We can't interfere with the market, but at least we can hook some taxation out of it. Listen to all the talk about negative gearing. My word, didn't that put a brake on the residential tenancy rates? You know, my word, if only these owners were required to pay some negative gearing, I am absolutely sure they would have built more houses and they would have charged less rent. Incentives? That's not how the market works. It works on greed, it works on self-interest, and they happen to be much more the market forces, and I'm not trying to change the market forces. We just need to recognise all this stuff about providing houses for little people and affordable social housing, and we're right off the track, Mr Mayor, but I do think I do owe that particular contribution. I am not going to say to someone, you shouldn't be able to do it. You shouldn't be taking your housing and you shouldn't be letting it on short-term instead of long-term rentals. That's not the way we work. Kings...
Thank you. I'll put the motion, that is for approval, subject to conditions and advice. All those in favour? Those against? Abstention? Okay, thank you, Councillor Darko. I'll declare that carried. Thank you, colleagues. Moving on now on to 7.5, which is a planning application for 2/2 Ford Parade Lindisfarne, additions and alterations, multiple dwellings. The recommendation is for refusal and the reasons are provided. I'll call for a mover of the recommendation. Councillor James, a seconder. Deputy Mayor, Councillor James, please.
Yes, look, again, the question here is as to whether or not we believe that the recommendation that has been put forward as part of the officer's recommendation deals with the setback from frontage, as to whether that's compatible with the streetscape. And of course the proposal does not satisfy performance criteria, thank you, P1 of clause 8.4.3, as it does not have the site coverage consistent with that existing on established properties in the area. I just don't want to go and draw maps or create the 100-metre radius that, you know, that tends to be one of the one of the criterion I would suggest in relation to this. But I think we need to really look at the area in question, and Ford Parade is a beautiful part of the city, and it's stooped in history. It has all those recreation facilities at its doorstep, and hopefully we may have the ferry terminal down elsewhere, but anyway, if that pans out to be in Lindisfarne Bay, then that's another factor that may detract from, in my opinion, the actual ambience of the area. So the planners have gone into great detail here, and we've heard from two representatives, or we had two representations, and excellent contributions from the proponent and, of course, from the other party. And so when you are looking at the key aspects of this, and I do take on board that the second representative did expand on her concerns, and quite rightfully so, as she has every right to do that as part of her submission to this place. But at the end of the day, I think the planner has really, can I use that term again, drill down into the particular sections of the planning scheme, and they are 8.4.2 and 8.4.3, of which it does not form part of the acceptable solution, and hence the performance criteria has come into the assessment process, as well as the site coverage, and that does not have site coverage consistent with the established properties in the area. So again, reluctantly, we're up on our feet, or I'm up on my feet, and I'm pursuing a request from my colleagues to support this. But at the same time, I think we need to be wary of what these areas and how we need to look after them and make sure that they are maintained, not only for this generation, for the generation to come.
Thank you, Councillor James. Deputy Mayor, Councillor Ritchie, please.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and I'm sure that many of us put quite a bit of time and effort into looking at the detail around this proposal. We would much rather be in a position of approving development applications where we can. Of course, understandably, it is a beautiful part of the world, and I can see why one might be excited to redevelop that particular site. I know it well, walk past it many times on a regular basis, in fact. So I can see, and I think this is a case of the excitement about what a plan could be, what a lifestyle could be, has simply overstretched what capacity we have to deliver under the planning scheme. Naturally being non-compliant with the scheme initially, and then also then not being compliant with the further assessment under the performance criteria, and taking into account all of the advice provided to us, including not only TasCat but also Supreme Court of Tasmania decisions, has made it very difficult for us to get ourselves into a position where one would viably think that an alternate would have the legs to stand up to an appeal. That's always the position that I would try to work myself to. If I feel that I can run an alternate where it would have the strength to withstand appeal, I'm always very happy to take on that challenge where I think that can happen. Unfortunately, in this case, I don't think that an alternate motion based on the current design would withstand an appeal process. So for that reason, I will have to be supporting the refusal motion, but I have no doubt that we will see, hopefully, some altered design come back to us at some point in the future that's going to be something that we can support through the planning scheme. And I do thank both of the representatives that made very, very compelling contributions this evening. They were greatly appreciated, and unfortunately, in this instance, not able to be supported this evening. I thank colleagues for their contributions.
Thank you, Councillor Ritchie. Any other colleagues? So, Councillor Warren, thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yes, I also thank the two deputies for their heartfelt deputations. It's always very emotional when this is the place that you live or the place that you want to live. But this one is much more clear-cut than a lot that where we have discretion and could go either way. If you look at 8.4.2, it does say that the streetscape has to be set back 4.5 metres, and the current proposal is only set back 1.9, and it tapers to 1.1 at the southwest corner. So it's not even close. And there are no other properties built under the current planning scheme that have a similar sort of difference. So there are some older properties built under a former planning scheme, but under this planning scheme, the criterion is 4.5 metres, and this proposal does not meet that. So I too look forward to a revised proposal that meets both the needs of the applicant and that is compliant with the planning scheme. And our planning officer, manager, director, Mr Maher, has done an excellent job of clarifying this for us. So I hope that the applicants take the opportunity to discuss that again with Mr Maher and get that same level of clarity so that the next application is one that we can happily support.
Any other colleagues wishing to make a contribution? Councillor Walker, thank you.
As with other contributions around the table, I do thank both representatives tonight, and I thank the proponents for their correspondence and for the invitations and opportunities to attend the site. I had intended to avail this afternoon, but as they say, the road to hell is paved with good intentions, and that was something that couldn't happen, and I think that would have probably been quite a useful activity. Ultimately, though, we're looking at some fundamentals, and the fundamentals are site coverage and also the setback issues that have been raised by other colleagues. I just, as per the report, I don't believe that it would be defensible to approve the application as it stands. That's not to say that that mitigation wasn't part of the mindset of the proponents. They were actively looking at things they could do to not have an impact on their neighbours, and I think that's to their credit. And whilst not a planning matter, I also acknowledge their familial, long-standing connection to the area. But we're sitting as a planning authority. The report's in front of us, and as I said, as per those two fundamentals, I don't think this application can be supported.
Thank you, Councillor Walker. Any other colleagues? There being none, Councillor James, right of reply. Thank you. I'll put the motion then, that is for refusal, and the reasons are outlined in the recommendation. All those in favour of that recommendation? And that's unanimous. Thank you, colleagues. Right, Council now concludes its deliberations as a planning authority under the Land Use Planning and Approvals Act of 1993. Moving on now to item 8, reports of officers. Moving down to 8.2, 8.2.1, which is Victoria Esplanade and Queen Street Master Plan Adoption. Councillor Walker to move that. A seconder. Councillor Chong, thank you. Councillor Walker.
Thank you. And firstly, putting a bit of historical context on it, I want to thank the councillors in 2019 who supported my motion, which was around putting a hold on the interim works till a review of the 2013 Vic Esplanade and Kangaroo Buff landscape plan could be undertaken. That was a plan I hadn't supported, and I think the interim works were well below the calibre that this highly utilised and highly appreciated area warrants. It has been a while coming along, but in that time frame, I think that would bring me on to the second round of thanks, and then that goes to the staff for the plan that has been developed and is before us tonight. It's a vision worthy of this high utilised iconic track and much valued area of municipality. So the end result, I think, is worth the toil that's gone into it, and I think this is an area that should be given a master plan that is right, rather than some form of plan that is more expedient. And I guess when it comes to infrastructure, and largely when you look at this is in many ways a public works infrastructure project, I think I welcome scrutiny of the projects that the council puts forward, and I think that should happen with all council projects. And I think when we look at some of the infrastructure projects, longevity matters, and I think these changes are of intergenerational benefit. And also the other matter is, who are the beneficiaries? Because sometimes with council infrastructure projects, all of them, if you like, are dispersed subsidies from the ratepayers, but sometimes the beneficiaries are quite a small, concentrated group. And in this case, it is a diffuse group of beneficiaries. This is a highly accessible piece of infrastructure that will be utilised by, or available for utilisation by all residents and people from outside the community in Greater Hobart and from further afield. It isn't something that's likely to all be done in one hit, and there'll probably be some changes over time. But it has been drafted in a way that it can be credibly staged without, I think, adding a lot of cost to projects. And sometimes when you stage, you do really ramp them up. But again, that was part of, I think, the hard work that went into the design. And I will wrap up, I guess, and then I guess the final round of thanks would be to community members that participated throughout the consultation. And I think a particular shout out would go to the Bellreeve Bluff Land and Coast Care Group, and in particular Graham. So let's see this come along, and maybe the track will go by a variety of names, and one of it might be the Rainbow Connection. So thank you all. I strongly encourage you to support this plan.
Thank you, Councillor. Before I call on Councillor Chong, members of the public, you're very welcome to stay for the remainder of the meeting. We wouldn't be offended, though, Mr. and Mrs. Batchelor, if you decided to leave. Yeah. Good evening. Ned, you able to help, please? Thanks, Ned. Thanks, Rudy. Councillor Chong, thank you.
Thank you. As Councillor Walker has mentioned, this has been a long time in the making. But to again echo his comments, I think that we've now got a really excellent master plan for this area, one that recognises both the local needs but also the wider needs of the municipality that use that area on a regular basis. I would also perhaps echo the thanks to the staff that have done an amazing job, and also to the community that have gone and put a lot of effort into making comments on the master plan, and I think it's a much better document for that. And I seek my colleagues' support.
Councillor Kennedy.
Thank you, Mayor. Just one thing I'd like to add, following on from Councillor James's comments. Walker, is that prior to your motion in 2019, there were a couple of us on a very cold morning on the Bluff that actually met with a group of residents. And what was interesting with their feedback was that there are a lot of younger people that have moved into the area. So we have Graham and his team, but they were the ones that encouraged us to put this on hold until we got it right. And I think we've actually got there. So that's it for me. Thank you.
Councillor Kennedy. Councillor Warren.
Thank you. It's always good to know where you're going, and we may change our minds along the way, but you need to have a master plan so that informs the decisions that we make along the way. So I do support this.
Thank you. Councillor Mulder, thank you.
Run the risk of taking the title of contrarian on this one. This is a pretty expensive street makeover if you look at it in the scheme of things. When this was debated some time ago, a few years back now, it was slated at around about 10 million. Yet I now look at stages 1 and 2 only, and they're already up to 3. And we all know what happens with government estimates of costs these days. And is this, as the documentation says, a visionary document, a visionary master plan? No, not in my view. A vision is something where you see how things could be different in 10 or 4 years. This was a $10 million makeover, is I would suspect rapidly heading to a $20 million, if only the former, street makeover. If you want a vision for this place, then have a look at somewhere like the Corso in Manly, where the ferries turn up on one side from the major city, and there's an avenue which would be Queen Street. Sure, it's residential, but surely we can have a vision of a ferry to the beach, of a broad promenade where businesses and other people like that, where the Saturday markets start to spring up. That would be a visionary project. A visionary project that recognises the Bellarive Oval. A visionary project that recognises the benefits of the historical Fort Battery. Yet none of these things are mentioned in this visionary document. I agree with the Fort Port. I agree with stages 1. I have concerns about stages 2 because those of us sat around here in the last council when someone came up with some private money to lease the pavilion, which is now a glossy picture with canoes and boats and everyone enjoying it, and they wanted to spend a fair amount of money renovating this derelict council property, and in the end walked away because our parking code was going to smack them for a great heap of money, when by any stretch of the imagination, read this report, such a restaurant would be relying on passing foot traffic, not cars. But our blind adherence to the code, to the parking code, basically drove away someone. Visionary? Yep, nice pictures. And when the rubber hits the road, we stop people from actually developing it and using it and making it what it could be, because we just assume, contrary to all the evidence in front of us, that people have to find a way to park there when there's something like, what, 15,000 people a day? Was that the figure that I saw in the report? A month, yeah, I was going to say. Would mean 1,000 people every hour. And there aren't that many. But it's a pedestrian way, and we really need to think about some of this stuff when we're doing there and we're producing pretty little pictures, and then we go and block people actually using the advantages that it has. I really have trouble with this. We are launching a master plan, and we're all saying, oh yes, subject to other people's funding. We can't even get the state government to fund roads like Pass Road, yet here we are thinking they're going to step up to the plate and fund an enhancement to a footpath and a walkway. No, I can't support this. I think the problem with these master plans is that they are not visionary, but they are pie in the sky stuff. And what we're doing is we're creating an expectation amongst our ratepayers that we're going to actually build this thing. And we all know it's conditional upon someone else stepping up to the plate, and the history of that, particularly in regards to Clarence, isn't that great.
Any other colleagues wishing to make a contribution? Councillor James, thank you.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. And again, it's an interesting concept. It notes, as we all know, what the recommendation says, but Part B, adopt the Victoria, Esplanade and Queen Street Master Plan. And therefore, we're going to authorise and presume that the design for stages 1 and 2 will be a matter for incorporation within the budget coming up, probably in the next round of discussions and workshops. And I thank Mr Graham for providing the costings. I raised that on Friday at the briefing. And stages 1 is approximately 1.1 and stages 2 is 1.8. I think I've got the numbers right. I just jotted them down here. But the overall cost at the moment, estimate, is over 13 million. And that is going to not only incorporate Victoria Esplanade, but most of the Queen Street and even into the village proper, Belbury Village proper. So it's not just Victoria Esplanade, but it's going to take in most of the Bluff and Queen Street, and also obviously down into the beach area and Chapman Street and so on. That's the vision, that's the long-term plan. So I think over the weekend when I was looking through the agenda, and I thought, crikeys, 13 million here, there's another, 30 million that we're proposing for our contribution to Bayview, another 5 or 6 million to Anzac Park, 50 million to this place if we go ahead with the development. So all these numbers, where's the money coming from? Does it mean that we're going to start borrowing and start to say, well, look, in the longer term we've got to have these iconic masterpieces, but basically the ratepayers in the future are going to be straddled with this, in my opinion, long-term debt. And what we're making a decision now on a master plan, even though it's going to be looked at in piecemeal as it does, but we have actually started the process by Part C to authorise and commence design work. Now, design work comes at a cost, and that has already been listed as part of the cost, and it just peters out at this stage 3 million, but then again we don't know what the other costs may be associated with this. So look, I'd like to see something that I can be party to and then say, look, we have this vision of, and it was mentioned back in 2019 when a former member of this council, Edmonds, made the comment, "We are paving those streets in gold." And I remember that. And at that time, and it was referred to by my colleague, Councillor Mulder, a moment ago, and it was bandied about at 10 million. It was in that time.
The yellow brick road.
Oh, I may have got it wrong. I may have...
Thank you, Councillor.
Dorothy Gale was the yellow brick road, but this is gold-plated road, in my opinion. It really is going to the nth degree. So, look, I won't support it. I may be criticised, and I know a lot of those hard-working people as part of the Victoria, Victoria Esplanade Landscape, whatever. Anyway, yeah, Bellerive Land Care Group have done a great job, and they've kept it on the boil. But a couple of my colleagues made the comment, one of whom, it's a high iconic track. I don't like the word track. It really does take a lot of the gloss out of it, and perhaps that's really unfortunate. And another colleague mentioned the wider needs of the community. Well, look, I don't think the wider needs of the community have really been consulted on. There's not a $13 million price tag, which is what the ultimate cost or more is going to be. So at the end of the day, do we need, at this stage, to lock in stages 1 and 2 at a price tag?
Thank you very much. Are there any other colleagues wishing to make a contribution? Before I call on Councillor Walker for his right of reply, can I just thank the CEO, Mr Gray, Ms Wicks, and all their members of their team that have been involved in the project to date, because there's been wonderful engagement with our community. The feedback results are there for us all to see. I was on the bluff that very cold morning in 2019 when we very quickly found out who had the better car heater or seat warmers. But it is ready for adoption, this plan, which is a wonderful place to be in. It is supported by our community. As said before, and I was criticised by some members of our community too back in the last term, that Bellerive is a bit tired. It's more than tired. It needs some love. And it's time that we invest in this iconic part of our city. And this master plan goes a long way to deliver. And from my perspective, it simply cannot happen soon enough. And yes, it will cost money. That's obvious. It will cost money. But we're investing in our city. We're investing for our future. This ought to be the showcase of Tasmania. And I'm confident that once we get this master plan in place, we fund it appropriately, we resource it appropriately, people will travel from far and wide to visit this iconic part of our city. One only has to look at the works that we undertook in Percy Street. And every time I'm in Bellerive, the shop owners there, the traders, the locals, congratulate council for that investment. It lifted the whole area. Imagine what we can do when we back in this master plan and actually start to deliver. And also, just a point of clarification, the pavilion's actually owned by the state government, not by council as well. So, those few words, not speaking as your mayor, of course, but as one of your colleagues. I now call on Councillor Walker for his right to reply, please. Councillor Walker.
Thank you, Mayor, for your contributions as well, and the contributions of everyone around the table. And this isn't a planning matter, but this is, if you like, a long-term asset management thing, and it's good to hear different perspectives and potentially be swayed by them. I'm not swayed by the idea of putting a Corso in Bellerive. The Corso is basically the Elizabeth Street Mall with a few less trees and a lot more seagulls. Some nice ice cream along the way, maybe, but if the talk is around, a place where ferries come and, that's, if you like, on the other side of the CBD, and this is the area I mentioned last time, but it's sort of it's germane here. This is more like Devonport in Auckland than I think Manly in New South Wales. And the budget elements, again, I think as part of a budgeting process, one of the key things I said is is this a concentrated benefit to a small group or a dispersed benefit to a wide group? It's a dispersed benefit. So the benefit per user for the costing, makes this form of investment really compelling for the amenity and enjoyment and health and wellness that it delivers. It is scheduled to be done in stages, and I think that's valuable. Budgeting is about prioritisation. These sort of things, I think, should be prioritised ahead of perhaps other asset projects, and I would suggest some non-asset projects. And I think that it's highly defensible. So, I respect everybody's views. This won't be a unanimous vote, but I'm kind of looking for 9 to 10. Let's see how we go.
Thank you, Councillor Walker. I'll put the motion. That's the recommendation. All those in favour? Those against? So carried. So 10 to 2, I think that was. Right. Moving now on, colleagues, to item 8.2.2, the Clarence Draft Cycling Strategy. Okay, Councillor Kennedy and the starring role, Councillor Hunter as a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Kennedy.
And I don't really have anything further to add other than just looking at the statistics again as to the amount of people that actually are using this space is quite impressive. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kennedy.
Yeah, I'd like to thank Councillor Kennedy for her enthusiasm for this.
Stealing the thunder.
That's great. I'd also like to thank the officers' efforts in getting the strategy to this stage, as it's been in the pipeline for quite some time. The strategy incorporates priority cycling improvements that have been identified in road projects as well as relevant master plans, which is excellent. The projects proposed have been well thought through and are well justified. The strategy has been developed with advice and recommendations from the Bicycle Advisory Working Group, the Bicycle Network, and the Department of State Growth. I'm really keen to hear what the broader community have to say about this strategy, so I seek my colleagues' support in getting this out for community consultation.
Thank you, Councillor Hunter. Councillor Hume, please.
Thank you, Mayor. It is a very comprehensive strategy, and the officers and everyone involved has, the community through consultation has done an excellent job. It covers a whole lot of different aspects of encouraging bicycle use. One of the major concerns that I raised when the City Development Advisory Committee was consulted on this strategy was around how do we ensure that when identified bicycle connections go through private subdivisions, that we can maintain those corridors and those connections. And my understanding is that through the planning scheme, you can actually adopt, or when subdivisions are done, you can compel developers to put aside particular parts of public open space if there's an identified strategy. And this is the strategy that we can point to in doing so. So not only is it about what we do with our infrastructure, but it can be about what developers do with theirs. I guess that one thing Councillor Hunter I know would like to change about the strategy is the photo on the cover. But otherwise, I don't have a problem with the cover photo, but otherwise I think it's an excellent strategy.
Thank you, Councillor Hume. Anyone else wish to make a contribution? Councillor Walker, thank you.
Yes, and just entertain my less than perfect memory. Can you furnish me of what workshop we discussed the strategy at? I'm just trying to recall whether I was there or not.
Last Monday.
I was there. I was there, far away.
Failing memory.
Failing memory. I was interstate. And I, in fact, I was out of the country, so I didn't quite go through some of the hard copy. I guess one of my questions relates...
Sorry, Monday before last. So it wasn't last Monday, Monday before last.
That's right. No, good, got it. On page, I think it's, is it 12 or 17? The font's really small.
It's one without Councillor Hunter.
Page 17, which is the proposed arterial cycling network.
Yes, it is. Page 17, yes.
Thank you. So there's nine roads that are both Greater Hobart Cycling Plan and Hobart Regional Arterial Bicycle Network Plan. 3 of those are state and 6 of those are ours, and there's some inferences to what's going to happen with those or the potential treatment solutions for arterial cycling route corridors. Can I be furnished with what I could expect those interventions are likely to be for, say, Bligh and Clarence Street?
Thank you. Mr Graham, are you in a position to provide an answer, please?
Through you, Mr Mayor, I mean, all of those, we would actually workshop concepts with council and consult with the community before actually coming up now with actual, I can say, you know, designed outcomes of what we would achieve. But, I mean, we would look at the frequency numbers in terms of the cyclists, the road corridor we've got, in terms of risks of safety to cyclists and the pedestrians and decide on and come up with options to workshop with council on what would be desired outcomes to then consult with the community, rather than specifically saying now that we're going with, for example, separated cycleways. I'm not in a position to explain that, but we would work through with council on the proposed options.
But there's an inference that that's the sort of thing that could be occurring. Is that correct?
In terms of separated cycleway, it may, but it's highly unlikely, for example, on all these roads here, we're going to have separated cycleways. For example, it's highly unlikely on Pass Road you're going to have a separated cycleway unless we can get a shared path off the road, and then that's designated actually as a cycleway. Okay. But we're aiming for safety and cyclists on our road reservation network.
Thank you, Mr Graham.
Okay, thank you for that answer. So I'll put Bligh Street to the side, but I guess Clarence Street's one worth sort of thinking about, because this council did extensively look at that street back in the last decade, I think. And we went through a lot of process, it was a long, heavily involved process, and when the choice came down to the idea that we were going to strip parking from one side of the street and drop a major arterial vehicle road from 60 to 50, the view around the table was no. And I guess if we're going out with this document, and that street, for example, is in this document, it's got the ticks as a AAA route and from the Hobart Regional Arterial Bicycle Network Plan, then I think it's going out with some embedded conflict from the get-go, because people will look at the plan and say, well, changes are going to happen there, whereas council's position hasn't been retested and retried around this. So there's some concerns that are sitting with me right now. I'll listen to the rest of the debate, but perhaps in a very long-winded question, or a preamble anyway, perhaps through you to the General Manager, Ross, how might some of that be assuaged now and before this document goes out, or is that just off the table?
All right, I will ask the CEO to provide an answer, please. Thank you, CEO.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. Thank you for the question. This strategy has been developed over quite a period of time with a lot of input from various groups, and focuses on creating a commuter network which, not surprisingly, mirrors a number of arterial roads and looks at how those can be developed to accommodate more than just vehicles, because the reality of those roads is currently that they are used for more than just vehicle traffic. And the purpose of putting this document out to consultation is to test the community, to get feedback upon those proposals, and then bring that back to council for further discussion and work should there be a need to do so.
Thank you, Sue. Councillor Walker, anything else you...
No, I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. Councillor Mulder.
Someone who actually owns and uses a bicycle, and as someone who walks a lot of these arterial road networks, as some of you would be familiar, it just gets me sometimes that we're still stuck with this idea that the bike path has to follow an arterial road or a highway. And I think that's what Councillor Walker may have been getting to. Yet you have a look along the Howrah foreshore, there is no need for bicycle lanes down the middle of Clarence Street because we've got a perfectly good multi-user foreshore track that is probably just the same distance without the conflict of the road. And as we move towards more of the, and it's coming, we can put our head in the sand, but the idea of these scooters and rental stuff and that is the way a lot of people are choosing to travel now. And we should be starting to now think not just in bicycle lanes, but in individual transport modes. How do we get the wheelchairs down these places? How do we get the bicycles down these places? How do we get the people, walking down these particular places? And I look at this particular plan, and the thing that gets me, and Councillor Walker mentioned it, was we talk about the Tasman Highway as an arterial route, and we talk about Bligh Street as another place where we might put a bicycle path. Yet there is a verge. We're talking about parklands and trees, which runs right up the side of the Tasman Highway. I walk along it quite frequently, and there's out there now, and the state government's done a wonderful job of planting some things, and the turbo chooks are busy skirting with the traffic on the side of the road. Yet at each of those things in Warrane, we've built great walking spaces, great green spaces, and they all end up in this particular road reverse, but nowhere does it turn about how do we use that rivulet as a recreational area, as a parking area. On my previous iteration in council, we actually got a multi-user pathway built on the other side of the Tasman Highway. It links across Dampier Street. Yet on the old Dampier, yet when you get onto the Warrane side, there's nothing but marsh and trees and things like that where we could have built a user pathway along the side of the Tasman Highway. The same we did at Wisdenvale, as the Deputy Mayor would remember in her time in another place. But those areas alongside the roads, while we've still got the room, now is the time to put a footpath. People complain about me walking up the middle of South Arm Highway. I'm sorry, that's where the footpath is. They put it in the middle of the highway. Yet on the side of the highway, great spot for, tracks and paths, there's no multi-user pathway. And we built one across the top of Rosny Hill Road, but where are they? Why aren't all our highways like that? Why aren't all our road reservations parklands, places where we can plant, use and recreate and stuff like that? And that's my one big thing about the state. If you're talking about the bicycle roads, before you start digging up the idea of Clarence Street and Bligh Street, just have a look at the roads. And the example of that is the Melbourne Water Board. You have a look at the bike paths in Melbourne, and they all follow the creeks and the waterways throughout Melbourne, and that's where their parklands is. All their parklands are on those watercourses. And when we go to look at our new developments like Skylands and Droopy Point, think about the watercourses as places where people can move off the road, where there is no conflict with traffic, and where that also form wildlife corridors and that also form green spaces, habitat and recreation spaces. A bicycle strategy is great, but it's part of a people movement strategy that takes us away from conflict with cars, because that's where the danger is with bicycles.
Thank you, Councillor Mulder. Councillor Goy.
Thank you to everyone for what they've had to say so far. I note that this is just to approve the draft cycling strategy for community consultation. We always like to consult with our community. I particularly like the 2.5, Action 9, promoting adequate messages for shared pathway use. It's a personal bugbear of mine for the last 10 years. It's taken me to get the signs up on the cycle lane along Mortimer Bay, and that I daily take my life into my hands combating with cyclists with a horse. I did receive an interesting phone call the other day from a non-horse person lover who proceeded to tell me she thought all horse people were incredibly rude. Not me, of course.
You did say all.
Yeah, she did. She didn't realise that I was actually one of them, so that was quite amusing. When I explained to her that the origin of the track was actually for safe passage for horses. So he wasn't particularly thrilled with the new signs that require her to smile to the horse riders. So I definitely think some better community engagement for signs would be a benefit, and some more signage. And I love the social media and direct contact, because most people don't know how to do the right thing. And, it's not hard to engage with other users and explain to them that hiding in the bushes isn't the best way to approach a horse, or riding up without seeing a 700-kilo black horse probably means you're not actually paying attention to where you're going. So I seek colleague support. It'll be interesting to hear what the community has to say.
Thank you, Councillor Coyne. Councillor Chong.
Mr Mayor, just quickly, I do think it's important that this goes out for consultation, and I will be supporting it. As someone who was around when the Clarence Street consultation was happening, there was a lot of consultation, and very many people were unhappy with the answer that we got to at the end of it. I think times have changed. I think people's ability to think about different ways of transport and so on has changed in those intervening years. And it's really important that we go out for consultation to test that, because that's the only way that we're going to know. And my other very brief comment is, as someone who does use the Howrah foreshore track a lot, the conflicts between walkers and cyclists and people with prams is constant. And I'm not convinced sometimes that while the multi-user pathways are amazing, that they're actually always the best place for cyclists, particularly commuter cyclists, to be using.
Thank you, Councillor Chong. Any other colleagues wishing to make a contribution? There being none, Councillor Kennedy, right of reply, please.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just picking up on Councillor Chong's point there, one of the issues can be with cyclists when they're ringing their bell is people these days have their AirPods in, so that's sort of something to kind of consider. But look, I think it's an outstanding strategy. Everyone should be congratulated on it. The experts in this space have had their say. Now we're going to go out to the community. That's what this motion is about, and I seek colleagues' support.
Wonderful, thank you. Well, colleagues, I put the motion is that we approve the draft Clarence cycling strategy for community consultation. All those in favour? Against? Abstention from Councillor Walker? So carried. Thank you. Moving now on to item 8.4, governance. 8.4.1, council meeting schedule. Moved by the Deputy Mayor. Seconded by Councillor Chong. Thank you. Deputy Mayor, thank you.
Yes, as per the officer recommendation. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Chong?
Ditto.
Thank you. Councillor James? All right. Anyone else wish to speak on this one? There being none, there was no need for right of reply. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Thank you. Moving now on to item 9, which is motions on notice. We have one standing in the name of Councillor Ritchie, seconded by Councillor Kennedy. Councillor Ritchie.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I should be fairly brief because this motion at its core is a simple one. It attempts to, and I think does, build on the motion that passed this place on the 15th of April, and I appreciate the work that was done in relation to that motion. What I'm attempting to do is, in effect, to add a time frame where there wasn't one previously. I note that the council officers have indicated they have been engaging with other stakeholders in relation to this, and in particular Tas Waste South. I don't think we can be completely sure on where that will land and how long that might take. So my concern was that we might miss the upcoming budget cycle if that became protracted or for some reason there wasn't any alignment with the sorts of considerations that we were hoping to be able to have a look at. So I felt it was prudent and definitely in the best interests of the community, so this thing doesn't drag on for a long time. I think most of us would very regularly have this issue raised with us as we're out and about in the community. I know that I certainly do on a very regular basis. So I think it is really important that we do put a time frame on ensuring that this report and any deliberations that arise out of that are well and truly going to be in time for the budget process that we're about to enter into. Because I think not to do that would continue to build angst in the community. Whichever way Council goes down the track, I think we just need to get on with it and have that certainty around expectation and time frame for consideration. So that's simply what the motion is about achieving, and I would seek colleagues' support in respect of that.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Councillor Kennedy.
Thank you, Mayor. Nothing really to add to that other than it would be great to be able to have something to say to the people in the community that are asking, is it going to come back? We know that there was a lot of support for it and a lot of people relied on it. I get the comments all the time now that Sorella's still doing it. Why aren't you? Can you tell us why? Understood that we had problems with suppliers' price, but it's really timely now to actually find out whether it is possible to bring it back and to give us something that we can actually go back to the community and say when they ask these questions, because they continue to do so.
Thank you, Councillor Kennedy. Any other colleagues wishing to make? Councillor Walker, thank you.
Thank you all. And there's a bit of an adage that goes, if you mess up, you should fess up. And I listened to the, or watched the recording of the council briefing of Friday, and felt that my words were egregiously misrepresented. And then I looked at the email correspondence I'd had with Councillor Ritchie, which I had said I consider this motion, what I thought I'd said was probably unnecessary, but I'd actually written probably necessary. So they were legitimate views that were conveyed at the time from the information provided. So I should get that on the table. Secondly, I'll listen to this debate with interest, but I sincerely thank all the colleagues that supported my motion in April. That motion was always working towards the next budget timeframe. I did ask a question 2 meetings back, and the weekly briefing report response was that that's where it's going. The General Manager's approach looks like, I shouldn't be saying what I said, but I think the officer's approach has been to try and sort of see if there's a critical mass of other councils before endeavouring to look at other options, and I can understand the rationale for that. The time I think is coming towards the end of that where that will be, you know, either going in with a team or going alone. But if it is going alone, speaking to some officers, I've got a high degree of confidence that the process is in hand, that if need be, certain consultants will be potentially engaged to help with it. The initial point of it was to see what some of those interstate models are to work with. So probably my default position is probably abstention at this stage until I sort of hear the arguments convincing me that we've got to sort of add this extra level to it. But I'll listen with open ears. But I guess if there's anybody who's changing their position from opposing my motion of the 18th or my motion of April to now supporting this, I'd be really interested to know what the rationale around that change was as well. I'll sit down now.
Councillor Warren, thank you.
I'm not a great fan of moving a motion asking officers to do something that they're already doing, but I won't stand in the way of this.
Councillor Dunker. Thank you.
Thank you. Really enjoyed reading the CEO's comment on this one, especially noting that we're going to be really focusing on diversion from landfill. I just wanted to ask the question at the end there where I'm referring to a report that would be delivered in the same time frame that this motion would have a report delivered, and I'm wondering, is there going to be any potential impact on the existing process as a result of this motion, or is that something that's not really going to change much?
CEO, thank you.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor, the intention has been to work towards the budget process for next year, so there won't be any impact from our point of view on that timeline. This is consistent.
Councillor Hume, thank you.
And the Deputy Mayor can address this in a right of reply if I'm incorrect, but my understanding of this motion is it's turning an intention to a compulsion. In other words, we will address this, or we will have this report ready to address it in time for the next budget, whereas the CEO's comments indicate that that it's expected to be delivered by then. That's, I understand, is the distinction. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor James, thank you. Sorry.
Thank you. I supported the motion that was carried on the 15th of April, and it was on the basis that it's highly valued by many Clarence residents, and that was part A. And the CEO is authorised to investigate contemporary alternative approaches to hard waste collection on how to basically reinstate the service. So that is on the go. It's been passed by the council, and the officers are continuing to gather information and obviously in consultation with other councils in relation to that. So then we come to the motions before us, and the preamble, part A, notes that, yep, has ceased. Yes, we know that, due to the inability. Yes, we know that. Cost and poor waste diversion rates. But the part B really locks us in my opinion, for the CEO and the staff to come up with other options and to be included as part of the cost-benefit analysis for the 25-26 budget. So what it's doing here is it's giving a push and a shove into the budget process when this particular motion, or what was carried on the 15th of April, gave time for the staff to be able to investigate and spend time deliberating and putting forward a lot of information that's going to be taken into consideration, because this is a really complex and very important issue and we need to get it right. So by short-circuiting it, in my opinion, by having it locked in to the budget process, and remember we start our workshops very early in late January, early February, so all of this information has to be available by then in order for us to be able to say yes, it gets a tick, or we come back for a further consideration. I don't like to put staff under pressure on this one. The reason why we were basically unanimous in scrapping hard waste was because there wasn't a reliable collection service, and it was done last time on a piecemeal basis where people, and I'm not criticising those operators, but we had trucks being brought in because of the need to have these areas finished, and obviously the hard waste picked up and collected, and they fell behind by 2 or 3 weeks, which was unfortunate. And then we had to bring in the what do we call it? The contractors with their utes and trailers and stuff. There were trailers involved in this. So look, I think we ought to let this run its course, not put the staff under pressure, because it's a huge issue and we want to get it right rather than cut corners as it would appear to be done if we lock it into the budget process for next year, 25-26.
Councillor Hunter. And then Councillor Mulder.
I'd like to thank Councillor Ritchie for bringing this forward, and I've gone back and forth on this one of whether to support it or not, and I think I've made the decision not to, but that's not because I don't agree with it. It's just because of the principle I have of not voting for motions where I think the work is already being undertaken. But I thank you for bringing it forward, because I think it's great to have the CEO's response on the formal record, and now the community are aware of the process and the timeframe. So thank you.
Councillor Mulder, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I rise particularly to the point that Councillor James was raising about, putting some expectations and that we're going to have to look at other options. And I'll just point out that Councillor Ritchie's motion, B, just about parallels the B that we voted on the last time. It's not creating any more expectations. It is simply saying that we authorise the officers to do it. This is a little bit of a hurry up. Yep, this is important because, as the CEO says, it was the intention to bring it before the next council anyway, before the next workshop considerations anyway, and there's nothing here that we haven't agreed before, except now we're locking in a particular timeline, which the CEO says is on track to meet anyway. So I'm not too quite sure where we get this extra work, extra stuff going on. But what I will point out is that there were some really, really good reasons why we did it. It was the cost. The cost was due to the fact that, and I don't think we can walk away from this, we had Veolia were doing it on a massive scale, and they had their trucks and their equipment, and then they decided they couldn't do it. They weren't going to do it anymore, because what they required then was the world's changed. We for a couple of years there played a very risky game where we said to a couple of people here, a couple of blokes, back of a truck, a few utes, a few trailers, as Councillor James says, and you'll go and lift these things and you'll chuck them on the back of the trailer and you'll take them. Sorry, workplace standards, workplace safety has moved on so far from that. And if council goes and gives contracts to people on the basis of costs, knowing they're engaging in unsafe workplaces, I don't think we can walk away from our responsibilities as a governing body to say, well, we turned a blind eye to unsafe work practices. I can imagine what the Industrial Commission would be making of those sorts of statements when the guys do their backs in. This sort of hard waste collection going into the future is going to require special trucks, it's going to require people with special lifting mechanisms, and it's going to require all those, the things where you don't have people lifting wardrobes and mattresses and fridges onto the back of trucks and trailers. No, you're going to have a truck that's got a lifting capacity and a crane on it that takes those things on board, and you can imagine how many of those trucks would be required, how much investment would be required by people doing this sort of stuff. And if you're prepared to do it, my famous thing is when I'm running for elections, people say, what are you going to promise us, Tony? Oh, you can have anything you're prepared to pay for. So if we're going to set ourselves up as to the be-all and end-all, sure. Watch your rates go through the roof as we have dedicated trucks running around the street and having to go and do a survey of the street to see what rubbish has got to be picked up so they know which particular asset they're going to have to go and send to that particular street to pick up those particular things. It's the big world, and I look forward to the report, and I look forward to the report that says exactly what it will cost us to do this stuff. And then the big thing is, yep, we can give people vouchers and we can transmit the risk to them, but we don't own a tip anymore, do we? No, dumbasses here sold it. Sorry, I retract that.
Thank you,
Most unparliamentary and most unchamber-like language. No, we were dumb enough to sell the tip, so we can't give people vouchers to take their rubbish to the tip because someone else owns the tip. So that's one of the things, is when you're talking about public service and you talk about privatisation, just remember the things. So I'm fully supportive of this motion, and I just hope that some of these factors will come and put this to an end for good for all, because the world has moved on and we can't do business off the back of envelopes like we used to.
Thank you, Councillor Moulder. Councillor Chong, please.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Look, like Councillor Hunter, I'm not going to support this, not because I don't think it's a good idea to look into it, but there are two reasons. Firstly, because my understanding is this work is already being undertaken and in a broader scope than just the hard waste collection, that the whole idea about how we deal with waste in Clarence is being looked at, and I think that's an important distinction and should be made. And the other reason is it talks about options for hard waste collection. It doesn't talk about or alternatives. It just says future options for hard waste collection. And I think it's very important that we think about how we divert, reuse, recycle, that we don't just think about how we collect hard waste, because that has a whole implication about how we dispose of it. And I think we need to think bigger than that.
Thank you, Councillor Chong. Any other colleagues wishing to make a contribution? Before I call the Deputy Mayor, I'll now enter the debate as a councillor, not as your Mayor, and just congratulate the Deputy Mayor for bringing this motion this evening, because as we all know, there is widespread support in our community for this service. And as your spokesperson, I'm the one that had to go out there and present Council's position when the decision was made to discontinue the service. And we know the reasons why, the cost of the service, but also the availability of a service provider. And I am, to this day, asked at least weekly, if not several times a week, by residents and ratepayers as to when we're going to reinstate this service that was so highly regarded by our community. This motion, particularly including the cost-benefit analysis, allows us to be as well informed as possible and then to share that information openly and transparently with our community. It sends a clear message to our community that we've heard them and that we will do our level best within what is possible and what is economically, financially responsible to ensure that we provide the level of service that they deserve, but also that they're willing to pay for. I would just like to pick up a point made by a previous speaker this evening regarding selling or closing the Lauderdale tip. It is important that we recognise in this debate that we were actually ordered by the state government around 2001 to close the Lauderdale tip. So our hands were tied there and we were duty bound to do that. So, and that's why I think it's important to note, as Councillor Walker would well understand, that we are a significant shareholder in Copping Joint Authority, and that of course has proven to be extraordinarily successful. And may I say, I don't think it's too much of a stretch to say world leading in some of the technology deployed there. It really is quite incredible, particularly with the CSIL. Many of us have been for a tour of that facility, and I note that Councillor Chong represents our interests on the CSIL board. This is not an easy decision. I know that when I went on ABC Mornings and I copped it from John X, I got off what I thought was a pretty tough interview, and then I got in the car and I copped it from my wife and my stepdaughters as well, because they also appreciate the hard waste collection service. So it's not an easy one, but at least now with this motion, we'll have some very tight or hard timeframes around this report. As I say, congratulate Councillor Ritchie for bringing this motion this evening. I'm delighted to support it. I'll now finish my contribution and call on Councillor Ritchie for her right of reply. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and I thank colleagues for all of their contributions and understand where everybody is coming from. I'll just address a couple of points that were made during the debate. Firstly, I don't think that this motion puts any undue stress or pressure on the staff. As the CEO and indeed the report indicates, it does coincide with the expected timeline that the staff have identified as to where they're up to in any event. Naturally, this is not new. this matter has been ongoing since we made the decision to withdraw the service initially, and it's been some time since that decision was made. So it's not like this is something new that's suddenly had to be worked on. So I don't accept that in any way, shape or form. In terms of actually directing officers, it's not unusual. It's good governance. We often seek requests from our officers to provide guidance and direction as to where council officers we may want them to work in various areas and what have you. So I don't actually see that as a problem in any way, shape or form. In fact, Councillor Hume is exactly right, and as is Councillor Mulder. All this seeks to do is just add that security blanket of a time frame. I don't actually think we're in any way also limiting what council can come back to us on. That's definitely not my intention. In fact, I would expect, and I think we all would expect, the quality of the report that comes back to us canvasses the broad range of issues, and that's certainly not the intention of my motion to shut down what might be brought forward in any event. So that's not what this was about. It was simply about putting a time frame on it because we need to be able to give that comfort to the community. I think it would be wrong for us not to do that because it is such an important issue. It is a highly topical issue. It's dragged on too long, and I think Councillor Mulder talked about earlier in another debate, it's just getting on with it. And I think now is time. So hence I've put that on there. I really hope that colleagues will actually see that for what it is. That is all that it is. And I actually think it adds, not detracts, to the motion. So if you want to get on with it and see it in the budget process, I can't see why you can't support this motion. So I would ask councillors to reconsider any doubts they might have had and put their hand up, and I seek colleagues' support.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'll put the notice of motion, seeing in the name of Councillor Ritchie. All those in favour? Those against? Any abstentions? 1, 2. I declare that carried. Congratulations. Thank you very much. Moving now, colleagues, on to item number 10, Councillors' question time. I note that there are no questions on notice. 10.3, answers to questions without notice, previous council meeting, as listed in the agenda. Questions without notice. Are there any questions from the floor, starting this evening from Councillor Kennedy? Thank you. Councillor Chong. Councillor Warren.
2 questions which are sort of interlinked. Just a short time ago we had an incident in the chamber with a member of the public struggling to get up the stairs, and we know that these are not accessible, and as someone who has mobility issues I would struggle to get up those stairs as well. So I wonder if we should investigate at least getting a handrail in front of each of the seats on at least one side. But that leads me to the bigger question, which is that in one of the weekly briefing reports our attention was drawn to the fact that council continues to spend a lot of money renting premises for staff because this building is no longer fit for purpose. It doesn't meet accessibility standards, and we've far exceeded the capacity of the building. So my question is, is it possible to investigate a short-term fix for those for the chamber? Because we do have a lot of people of senior age, shall I say, or who attend meetings, and I think that would just give a little bit of extra comfort and allow people to get to the microphone safely. And my second question is, could the CEO update us on plans for the future of Clarence Council chambers that will provide a contemporary and acceptable and safe workplace for staff?
Thank you, Councillor Warren. In response to your first question, the short answer is yes. It can certainly be investigated, and it will be investigated, and we'll come back. We'll find a solution for that. And the second question, thank you, sir, regarding this council chamber.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll defer the question or the answer to Ms Wiggs. Safe to say that we have been following the previous discussion with council, working on a business case proposal. I'll allow Ms Wiggs to fill in some details.
We're currently up for tender for a business and needs analysis as well. A needs and demand analysis and a business case. for the Chamber's redevelopment and a civic and administration centre. So we should be coming back with a briefing report in another month or so. Outcomes of that.
Thank you, Ms Wicks. Councillor Ducker. Councillor Goyne.
Two questions. I believe that there was, with the toilet redevelopment of Possum Bay toilets, a beautiful new footpath put in, but there is a bollard, I'm assuming to prevent motorbikes and or other. Is that a permanent fixture? Because I do believe that it is not accessible for wheelchairs and prams.
Yeah, Mr Graham.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'll take that one on notice and inform council.
Thank you, Mr Graham. Councillor Goyne.
And my next question is in regards to the filling stations, the private filling stations being closed at Lauderdale. I'm sure you've all heard that they are to be closed. I've been liaising with Taswater without much success, and I'm wondering if there's any space for council to liaise at least with a possible extension of the closure, or at the very least allowing the... So I believe the infrastructure is going to be discontinued, dismantled or capped, I think was his words. At the very least, I believe since the infrastructure exists, that it should be left to be able to be used in emergency situations, particularly given, you know, we're a bushfire-prone area. And I just wanted to know if council has capacity to do some work in that area.
Thank you, Councillor Goyne. Mr Graham.
Through Mr Mayor, we'll liaise with Taswater and inform council what the options are in terms of that.
Thank you. Councillor Walker. Thank you. Councillor Jones.
Two questions. Firstly, there has been some correspondence in regard to the new multi-purpose pathway in Anzac Park, and there has been a suggestion that bollards be installed at either end of the pathway. And I think there has been correspondence to the effect that that is not an option. Is there any other ways or means by which, and it appears that the cyclists are using it as a really fast track through there. So the question is there anything we can do either to temper the speed on those cyclists and even have a reconsideration of the bollards, please?
Mr Graham.
Through Mr Mayor, I remember the correspondence going out, but I don't know the specific details right at the moment, so I'll investigate that with my officers and inform council.
Thank you, Mr Graham. Councillor Jones.
Yeah, the second question is in relation to the final consultant's report regarding pipe clay esplanade. We were waiting on the Cremorne, I think the word is yes, coastal plan. Thank you. That's it. That's the one. And so, and that did entail a number of consultants interstate. So I think it's Mr Graham again, Mr Mayor, and is he in a position to advise council when we can expect that into the chamber, please?
Mr Graham, please.
Through Mr Mayor, and part of this will be, I wanted to take on notice to inform Councillor Mulder on his question before. So we've received the draft local coastal management plan for Roaches Beach and Pipe Clay Lagoon. We're having a presentation by the WRL in a few weeks to councillors so we can inform it, but we do need to understand how this relates to the coastal hazards policy that council has adopted, and there certainly may be further liaisons with Crown. But I'll do an initial briefing to council and through the CEO in terms of the status of the plans.
Thank you, Mr Graham. Councillor Hume.
Thank you, Mayor. Two questions from me. The first one is, and I was prompted to think about this while I was driving past Clarence Street with the intersection near Cambridge Road. We have an issue in state legislation that a developer can achieve substantial commencement, but then once they have, there's nothing to compel them to complete their permit. Are we aware of if the state government is intending to make any legislative changes to address this?
CEO, to you or Mr Marr?
Thank you. I'll default that one to Mr Marr.
Thank you. Mr Marr.
Through you, Mayor. Thank you, Councillor, for the question. The simple answer is no. There hasn't been any consultation on it. In actual fact, there's been the opposite, in that a draft bill has been lodged, or a bill has been tabled before Parliament, seeking to enable the Minister to grant a further 2-year opportunity for substantial commencement. There has been no other changes to enable a sunsetting or a forced completion period.
Councillor Hume, your second question.
That is disappointing. Second question, and I was prompted to ask this one by the debate and discussion around the Queen Street and Victoria Esplanade master plan. Back in my first term of council, I was trying to pursue whether we could do something with the kangaroo site, and I think that has enormous potential as a visitor experience, but unfortunately hasn't reached that potential because the amount of restoration work has been needed. We did have a report commissioned on that with an estimate of which was actually substantially short of what I expected it to be in terms of what it would take to restore that. But at that time, council decided not to pursue it. It is, however, a site owned by Parks and Wildlife. I'm wondering if there's anything we can do to push the state government to try and deliver something that would help that site to achieve its potential as a visitor attraction, and I do believe it has enormous potential.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Back in around 2018 or 2019, Council authorised me at that time to negotiate with the Parks and Wildlife Service to see if we could secure a lease over the site in order to take a more proactive role in its management. Those negotiations petered out for potentially a variety of reasons, but no one particular reason. And since that time, we haven't had any particular contact with the Parks and Wildlife Service regarding the state taking over a more active role in the site, or in fact ourselves. But we did pursue it around 2018 or 2019, but to no avail.
But I take your point, Councillor Hume. It is certainly something worth taking up with state government again, with a view to what might be possible. So it might be on a workshop in the near future. Thank you. Councillor Hunter.
Yes, just one. I'm happy to take this on notice. Could we please just have an update on the development of the Skyline Structure Plan and when Council might be consulted with or something presented to Council?
Yes. Mr. Moe, do you wish to add anything else?
Through you, Mayor. I can actually give you an update. The consultants have consulted with the targeted stakeholders and the major landowners. At this stage, we're trying to schedule a workshop in either the 18th or 24th or 25th of November. We're just working out which of those dates for the initial workshop with Council, then with Realm Studio. So that's our target date. I've obviously got to work with the CEO to work out which of those dates is the most appropriate.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Hunter. Councillor Mulder, please.
I rise on the issue of the potholes that have now on the extension of the road between Kangaroo Boulevard and the Yacht Club, which is extensively being used by, contrary to government policy, I might add, by all-day parking for the Belarus ferry. I raised this issue some time ago, both formally and informally, and a few weeks ago we were informed that everything looked on track, but we just had to get some legal advice. Several weeks have now passed since that advice on that legal thing, and I'm just wondering if we get an update on how we are progressing with filling what is basically a third world go track in the so-called jewel in the crown of our city.
Thank you, Councillor Mulder. CEO.
Thank you. I can provide an update through you, Mayor. As I communicated with councillors, I think around about a week or so ago after a contact from Councillor Mulder, at that stage we were waiting on some advice. Now I'm going to test my memory as to whether I did this or not, but I have corresponded with Shambroad, who at this stage are obviously the title holder for the land, and we have booked in a resheeting of both the road and the car park for the 28th of October, so in a week. I have been holding off on providing final update on that because I did correspond with Shambroad regarding that access and the upgrade, and I haven't heard anything back from them. But Councillor Mulder, you've preempted an email that was planned for later this week, so at this stage we're on track for the 28th.
Thank you, CEO. Councillor Mulder.
Just a point of clarification, resheeting, does that simply mean chucking gravel in the potholes and running grader over it, or is it a sealing of it?
No, not sealing it, but basically lifting the surface, more gravel recompacted so that it is a flat gravel surface.
Dare I suggest that maybe some thought drainage, because that's the issue.
There's a limit to what we can do, Councillor Mulder, because we don't own the land.
Not yet. All right, thank you.
Unless it's compulsory by the state government.
Councillor Ritchie. Deputy Mayor, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. I have two. The first one being in correspondence to Council on the 10th of September, the South Peninsula Residents Association raised the issue of insurance costs concerning community-owned pontoons located at South Arm. Are you in a position to update the Council on when a reply might be forthcoming?
CEO.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I was actually dealing with that issue this afternoon. I have asked some further questions in regard to the draft response that I had, and I would hope that I can have a response to councillors and also to the President of SAPRA later this week. Thank you.
Thank you, CEO. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you very much. Is Council able to advise further to our debate earlier in the evening around flood mapping? Is Council able to advise any work that may be undertaken to achieve updated flood mapping for the Richmond area, particularly as we head towards the legislatively required review time of our planning scheme?
Thank you, Mr Martin.
Through you, Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Ritchie. Yes, from my understanding, we have received some updated flood mapping from the consultants. That obviously needs to be worked through and looked at, implemented in the scheme. I'll take it on notice and discuss it with Mr Graham and provide a response about what might be a reasonable time frame or a path forward in terms of dealing with that matter.
Thank you. Well, colleagues, I note that we're now at the end of questions without notice. We move down to item 11, which is closed meeting. I call for a motion to move into closed meeting. Moved, Councillor Goyne, seconded, Councillor Kennedy. Thank you very much. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Thank you. So carried. So thank you to those members of the public who joined us in person this evening and those who attended via the live stream. Same place, same time, 3 weeks' time. Look forward to seeing you then. Please end the live stream.